All right, well, welcome to a special episode of Live from My Drum Room. Today I'm live on location at Cymbal Craftsman by Paul Francis with my old friend and former Zildjian colleague, Master Cymbalsmith Paul Francis.
Hi, John.
Hi,
Thanks
Paul.
for coming today.
Great
This is
to
great.
be-
Welcome to the shop. This is the drum room at the shop. And believe it or not, I have this really great drum set behind us. And very few people, when they come to pick up their cymbals, sit down and play the drums. So it's usually me playing them. But if you ever come by, please try out your cymbals on the drum set.
On the drum set.
It would be fantastic.
Yeah.
So,
Well, this is a first for me to do this on location.
sorry.
And part of why we're doing this today, Paul and I have been talking about doing this for quite some time. And he recently sort of clued me in on the fact that he was rebranding and really relaunching his company name and changing it to Cymbal Craftsman by Paul Francis, which I think everyone agrees is a great idea. And we'll talk about that in a little while. So I'm excited to be the first podcast that Paul's doing. And I'm excited for Paul to be my first on location, maybe my last one too. I don't know. It's a lot of stuff to
They'll
carry.
have to pay your flights and your lodging
right.
moving forward.
And if you know Paul, which I'm sure many of you watching and listening do know Paul, you know that he loves talking about cymbals, and he is truly an expert in all things cymbals. There's no one more knowledgeable on the planet than this man right here next to me, and I'm so honored to have him here with me. So come along for the ride, and please welcome Paul Francis.
Well, thanks, John.
Yeah.
And I just realized we've known each other about 37, 38 years, which is fantastic because we both started at our former employer.
That's right.
The same year. I started some months before you, but we kind of, as I like to say, we grew up there together.
We absolutely did. Yeah.
So,
and we started in 1989. I was 28 and you were 20.
20. Yep. I wasn't even 21 yet. So
Yeah,
it was
you were just
fantastic. So we've known each other for a long, long time. And this is great to see your evolution. I love the podcast. I love listening to them while I'm hammering. Sometimes I comment, sometimes I don't.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for all your support over the years.
Absolutely. And my pleasure. And thanks for continuing to make such beautiful instruments. And I know I speak for everybody when I say that too. You've really just raised the bar, so high. And let's talk. I've got some things I want to talk about. First of all, let's talk about the fact that you've changed your name to, we've got the banner behind me there.
See it, yeah.
Cymbal Craftsman by Paul Francis. And maybe just talk about the evolution. You started the company in 2022, kind of working from home, and how it just has evolved over that time.
So, I knew that I wanted to continue making cymbals regardless of what had happened when my career ended at Zildjian.
Yeah.
And I needed a name, and I used my Instagram handle, Cymbal Craftsman. And I was very, very, very lucky to have a bass player in my band who's also a graphic designer. His name is Tim Coletti. Not only is he a great graphic designer, he's a fantastic bass player. So I asked him to come up with a logo, and he came up with that we see behind us. And in the beginning, I didn't put my name in it only because I wanted the cymbals to speak for themselves. And so for the year of 2022, all of the cymbals that I was making out of my home garage lived under that banner. And I really only essentially had one, what you would call, series of cymbals.
Right.
And, people are like, well, what do these sound like? And I said, well, these are hand hammered and they're kind of, jazzier, but you can also use them for, many different styles of music because they weren't ultra thin. I tried to make some stuff right down the middle of the road so it could be used in different situations. And then in 2023, as everybody knows, that I had partnered with Sarah, and the company name kind of evolved into Royal, and we went on from there, and the Cymbal Craftsman name got folded into that more as a line of cymbals. But what I found for the last 3 years was I was trying to explain to dealers and drummers what's the difference between a Royal and a Cymbal Craftsman. And, after a lot of thought and talking to people that I know and I trust a lot, I decided to retire the royal name and bring Cymbal Craftsman back and add my name to it. Yeah. One of our former colleagues, Colin Schofield, was very helpful to me with kind of suggesting some stuff with branding. And he essentially said, you're missing an opportunity here. You have this other logo that's fantastic, and that really should be the hero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Colin Schofield, for anyone who doesn't know who he is, he was my boss at Zildjian. He was the head of marketing. He's a brilliant marketing person. I had him as a guest a while back, and I no better person to really kind of help guide you through that process than Colin, in terms of having a great vision. And I remember we were all hanging out together at PASIC last year, and he was, Colin's, we love the fact that he's very candid. He's British, so he just says he speaks what's on his mind, and he basically said, bloody hell, change that fucking name. Something. No, I don't know, but no, this is exciting. This is great because I think it really, having your name attached and having, like you said, and as Colin said too, the Cymbal Craftsman name is gold. It's got such great cachet to it. So.
Well, originally my Instagram handle, when I signed up for Instagram, I think it was 2017 or 2018, I wanted it to be Cymbal Maker, but I couldn't. It was taken. So I'm like, all right, well, Craftsman. And, things happen for a reason. Yeah. And it worked out great. And, it's really fantastic that I've stayed friendly and friends with, you and Collins and some others that are all, past employees. Because it's all been very helpful. You all tend to come out when I need you, when I need help with things. So you tend to appear like genies. You're my cymbal genies that appear out of the blue. But in addition to you guys, there's been a lot of support since I started. Of course, my wife and Steve Maxwell and Jim Padgett and Shane Keeney up at Drum Center at Portsmouth, and just a lot of people. Jerome Dupree became a very, very dear friend during this process.
That's great. Yep. And we'll come back to that because I definitely want to have you talk about the dealers. I made a note there and so much stuff to talk about too, because you're getting ready for the Chicago Drum Show, which is a huge show for drummers and it's certainly for you. But, I think was such a great part of your story, Paul, is that I remember going to your house when you first started doing it. You modified a cymbal for me. You fixed a cymbal for me, and you were working in your garage. And right out of the gate, I don't know of anybody that could literally, from day one, be sort of in business the way you were, and that's so due to your reputation, and just your reputation and your history and just your expertise. And so I guess what I'm getting at is, what was that like? I know it had to be scary. You've told me it was scary starting off on your own, but did you feel pretty quickly that it was going to work out okay for you? Did it?
I was extremely surprised, if I'm honest. The way that I like to describe it is I no longer had the safety net of our former employer underneath to catch me.
Yeah.
It was all up to me to do it now. And, although we were in a lot of meetings together and we learned a lot on the periphery about the business, it's tough starting a business and having to learn things from the ground up because it goes beyond just making the product.
Right.
So, again, back to Steve Maxwell, he came out of the gate first. I had put a cymbal up against an anvil and posted a picture that I was working on cymbals again. And he called me immediately. And he said, are you making cymbals again? And, what are they? And he had the first Cymbal Craftsman cymbals at the Chicago Drum Show in 2022. Because I didn't attend that show. I had never been to the Chicago show, so I didn't know anything about it other than hearing about it.
Right.
So, he said, send me a list and I want to buy them and I want to have them at the shop and I want to have them at the show. And then, it continued after that where the word got out. And I started to get phone calls from stores that I really wasn't familiar with. Wood and Weather out in Western Massachusetts I had heard of, and Joseph, who owns a store out there, he contacted me. Jason Slota, who owns Round Sound Cymbals out in California, which is a more of an online platform.
Yeah.
I think he messaged me on Instagram, and it just kind of slowly grassroots, it grew from the ground up. But I never ever take anything for granted, because things could just stop. And back to Steve Maxwell, he's like, "Oh, I want to have this many cymbals for the Chicago Drum Show." And I said to him, "You don't even know what these sound like. You just want these sight unseen." He goes, "I know you. I know your work."
That's, yeah.
So I was kind of unsure, being on my own, but that was quickly dispelled. And one of the things that I liked about what I was doing was the amount of freedom that I had to do things that we were only allowed to do for artists.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's huge, because, you certainly knew how to make cymbals and know how to make cymbals for, the general public, so to speak. But here you are now on your own, and you're kind of building your own brand. So you have to think about, I'm assuming you had to think about the mix of like how many 16-inch crashes and 18-inch crashes and different weights. And,
Right.
And the all those things that, which you certainly had a handle on at Zildjian, but you had the, I won't say the luxury, but you were, your job was to make the cymbals. You didn't have to really worry about a lot of that other stuff, but now you have to factor all that in. So
the way that I approached that, and, we both had a lot of time with Armand, and, he taught me, I had a lot of alone time with him, where he would say, every cymbal is a ride, everything is a crash, and they should do both equally well. So that's where I started.
yeah.
So
Yep.
the original cymbals, everything was called a crash ride. And I knew that was going to alienate some people until I was able to communicate that, no, it's not one and a little bit of the other. It's going to do both well. And, you're going to be able to ride it, and this is going to be able to keep time with your band, and you're also going to be able to crash it. And it's going to sound pretty. It's not going to sound gongy, because, it's more of a ride. So as I got that word out, people understood.
Yeah.
So it started with crash rides, and I favored more hi-hats and rides, especially 20s, 21s, 22s, 14 and 15-inch hi-hats. And this, again, all goes back to what we learned for me for 32 years. This is what I'm making. I'm making a hand-hammered product, so these are the sizes that do very well. Now, of course, I made 16s and 17-inch crashes for the people that would be looking for those, but the primary stuff was more kind of in the jazz drummers vein. And then I slowly stretched out into making some stuff that would be more bright, more kind of rock and roll.
Yeah.
60s, early 70s, before everything got really heavy and hooped up. And then after that, I'm part of a Facebook group where these guys go and they look for the early Ks that were made in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And there's only going to be so many of those that are going to be kicking around, that are going to be for sale. And I'm like, I have an opportunity here to make something that is reminiscent of that, because they were still being made that way when we started.
That's right.
So I know how they were made. So I'm like, okay, well, I have this type of hammer over here, and I'm going to do some hand hammering on them also. And because I was a lathe operator for so long, I know exactly how to lathe them. And that's been extremely successful. The nod to the early American K. And I know there was a woman up in New Hampshire that came up with that name. Do you remember her name?
Sherry Willoughby.
I think that's who it
she's
was.
married to Kenwood Denard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think she's going to attribute to her coining that name. And it's funny when drummers kind of coin something, or they give a nickname to cymbals, it means that they really take ownership of it. And you want that.
Yeah.
You want that in a brand.
No, that's, and those early American Ks, or people call them EAKs, you're absolutely right. They're a thing, and there aren't many. Like you said, there's only so many of those that are probably still in circulation, and that's a great opportunity because that's something you could make right now and replicate that sound.
And I'll make sizes that didn't exist. I actually have a request from Hawthorne Drum Shop for a 24. So I've made 23s, I've made 21. So those are sizes that were never in the catalog.
Right.
So, if somebody calls up or messages or through a drum store or one of the dealers, can you make this? I very, very rarely say no. So I try to, I want to be accessible to the drummers like we were talking about earlier before we went live.
Yeah. I just want to share this with everybody because just before we went live, while I was getting set up here at Paul's shop,
got to make the donuts, John.
He was making the donuts for 20 to 30 minutes anyway, hand hammering cymbals. And I just think I want to just show this because this is truly an amazing, process and art form that's the way you make these cymbals. I mean, they truly are made by hand. And
Each one. Every single one. And if it doesn't come out the way that it should for that model, it never leaves the shop. If you commission something through a store from me, if I don't think it meets, your expectations of what your sound requirements are, I don't let it leave the shop.
Yeah.
I can't do that to you. I can't make you spend, hundreds upon hundreds of dollars for something that's not great.
That's like when you buy a expensive car, you want to have that kind of support to know that if you're not happy with it,
right,
you can bring it back and they make it right for you. I mean, usually. And I think that's good. I wanted to talk about that too, because it's not a secret that your cymbals they're premium priced. They're not inexpensive. And again, it's a reflection of you and the quality and this, of course, the sound that, there's no shortage of people buying these expensive cymbals. And I think that speaks volume. And I wanted to ask you, so when someone wants to commission a cymbal, do they have to do it through a dealer or can they do it directly with you as well?
They can contact me. I like to sell through the dealers because, when I first started in my house, the dealers that we knew and worked with for decades, they came out and they supported me.
Yeah.
It really, Cymbal Craftsman was a brand that was unknown and, they didn't really have to pick up another cymbal brand.
Right.
So we need to keep these brick and mortar stores open. I mean,
absolutely.
You grew up, going to them. I grew up going to them, and they're very, very important because it goes beyond just buying a product. It really speaks to all the other service things that they do for you when you walk in the door to, purchase a cymbal or drumsticks or drum heads. You have experience at those stores, and you want to go in and keep them open. My cymbals are priced accordingly to what I consider my years of experience. And there's no inventory here. We do have some cymbals behind us, but I don't keep an inventory for people to come and pick from. Everything is made to order for the stores. No, I had a note. I wanted to make a note of that it's, everything is basically built to order. Mm-hmm. I'm a short order cymbal chef.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. And right now, as we talked about, you're building inventory for the upcoming Chicago Drum Show, but also filling orders for dealers.
Yeah.
So how far back are you, Paul, as far as like lead times? If Shane up at Drum Center Portsmouth gives you an order today, what would you quote for like a delivery time?
It depends on if I have the blanks to make the cymbal. So if I have the blanks, it could only be a couple weeks. When I started, it was 12 to 16 weeks. And, then it got compressed. And I would say that they don't have to wait more than, maybe 4 to 6 to 8 weeks.
That's great.
Now, so I have the Chicago Drum Show stuff that I'm making, but I also have 4 drum store orders, 2 that are all in the queue. And I have people saying, oh, you got to get more help and get more help. And what I need help with, and I have some people helping me, is, printing and bagging and putting the labels on the bags and shipping. Not necessarily I need an apprentice so I can show them how to hammer.
Right.
I need someone to check out the incoming emails. Usually if you message on Instagram or Facebook, it's my oldest daughter, Laura, that fields those, and then she'll text me and say, hey, did you see this? So she's the one that does a majority of the posting for like Modification Mondays.
Yeah.
Which is just, that just happened to happen by accident, that it got called that, because I'm like, well, this would be a good thing to do on Mondays, because I tend to work on modifications on Saturdays, and then they sit for a couple of days, and then I can record them after they've sat, and here's the after. So, another one of our former colleagues, John Sorensen, was here visiting, and he says, genius, Modification Mondays. And I guess a lot of people look forward to it. So don't take offense if there's one Monday here and there where I don't post. That means I don't have any modifications to do. So it's not like I forgot. So
no, I think it's genius too. And I love seeing the, on Instagram and Facebook, the before and afters. And I had a note to talk about modifications, because that's really become a nice part of your business, right? I mean, it's not as probably big as actually making the cymbals, but the fact that you can open it up to anyone. I see you've got a Peisty. That's a sound creation right there.
Yep.
Wow.
Okay. I don't want to hear from the haters about that. When you say it's blasphemy. Actually, I had a phone call with a guy yesterday that's going to send me 2 Istanbul Ks that Elvin picked out, but they're too heavy for him. So I said, you have to send them. I will evaluate them, and I'll let them know, do I want to work on them? Okay. Now, we have to remember, these cymbals belong to people, and they're not using them, and cymbals are meant to be played.
Right.
So if I can get it to where you want it, so you play it, and it's enjoyable to you, that's what this is about. Okay. I have mad respect for all the cymbal brands that have been around. My wife calls me the cymbal savant. I can talk to you about Peisty and Istanbul and Sabian and Zildjian, until the cows come home. UFIP, I'm just a cymbal fan. But I also don't believe that you should have a cymbal that you want to play, but you don't, because it doesn't bring you any enjoyment.
Yeah. I agree. And I brought a couple of old cymbals in last year or at some point, and you did some tweaks, some lathing, and it really brought new life to cymbals that were just sitting around. So it's a great alternative if someone has something that they like, but it's not quite there, and they maybe aren't in a position to buy a brand new cymbal. It's a great option to be able to do that, and whether they mail it to you or come by the shop here. And
all of that information's on. So there's a new website. Let me just segue into that. So Cymbal Craftsman, cymbals.com. So there's it's all updated, and there's a whole section on modifications. The price is there. And, what it does for you is, we contact me, we can have a phone call, and I take notes. Every time I talk to somebody about a cymbal that they want to modify, I take notes in a notebook. Even if you decide not to modify it, I have the notes in case you change your mind. But then when the cymbal arrives, I evaluate it based off of our conversation.
Yeah.
And then I get back to you and say, okay, I re-reviewed the notes. I played the cymbal. This is what I think should be done to it to get it to where you want. And most mods only take about 2 hours. And it's not 2 hours per cymbal. So if you send me 4 cymbals and it only takes me 2 hours, you only get charged 2 hours, because you're paying for my time, is what you're paying for.
Yep.
And then after the cymbal sits a couple days after it's been modified, I actually bring it in this room here, and I'll record an after video and send it to you. And then you say, oh, I want it a little thinner, or can you do this or that, before it gets sent back to you. So it's not like you told me what to do, I do it, and you're not part of the process, because I want you to be happy. So you don't get to see the Modification Monday cymbals until the cymbals like long gone.
Yeah.
The last 5 Modification Mondays, I shipped those out 6 weeks ago, And I'm like, oh, I have 5 modification Mondays, and I can just work on the Chicago Drum Show stuff. But I will say there have been a couple cymbals that came into the shop, and I did not modify them. There was one gentleman that came in, and he had a set of early 1970s new beat hi-hats, and these were quintessential new beats, beautiful. I put them on the stand, I played them, I took them off, I took the clutch off, I handed them back, and I go, I'm not touching these. And he goes, but I don't like them. I said, sell them. I said, I am not touching these. These are a beautiful set of hi-hats. And he was like,
what didn't he like, Paul? What was it about?
I just think there's so many options now that when you have something like this, you miss it.
Yeah.
And I said, these are just classic. If you have a pop gig, these are perfect. And let me just segue. So this is going to be a 4-hour show because I'm going to talk a lot. Let me segue into a story about Peter Erskine real quick.
I was just
about
Peter a minute.
new beat hi-hats. So he had come into the factory years ago.
Yeah.
He was playing with Diana Krall, and he was playing some 14-inch K custom dark hi-hats. And I don't know we might have been working on the left side ride or something else, or he was in town and he wanted to come visit.
I remember this. Yeah.
And he was saying to me, he says, I'm playing with Diana, and the hi-hats there's just not enough bite to them. The hats are really good. So I said, oh, do you have them with you? And we put them on a stand. I'm like, wow, those are really good. And then I started laughing. And he goes, what are you laughing at? I go, you're going to laugh too when I tell you what hi-hats you should be playing. And he goes, what? And he's waiting for me to say K Constantinople or something else. And I said, you want more bite? New beat hi-hats. And he looked at me and I said, I'll be right back. And I went into the vault and I grabbed, I paired up like 3 pairs and I brought him in, and he picked one. And then some weeks later, all I did was get a text from him, and it just said, new beat hi-hats with an exclamation point. So,
I totally remember that. I remember I think we went to lunch afterward at Strawberry Fair, one of those places, and he was kind of going, of course. Of course. Like, played them for years. And you make a great point, Paul, because I think the fact that there are so many options out there that it gives, I know I'm guilty of it too. You probably are to some degree, where it's like new beats, they cover so many things, but they're not, they're like a jack of all trades. But if you're looking for a dark sounding pair of hi-hats, they're really not the right ones. Or if you're looking for maybe like a John Bonham sounding rock hi-hat, maybe they're not the right one. So people get a little distracted, but I think when you come right back to it, you can use them for anything. Really, you can sort of make them work for things that maybe they're not the most perfect thing, but overall, they cover 99% of whatever you need.
And the desert island cymbals.
Yeah,
I mean, we referred to them, or bread and butter.
Yeah,
they'll if you had to go play a gig and sit in for somebody on their kit and all they had was A's, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And you're going to sound like you. Trust me.
Yep. We just sold some new beat hi-hats, you and me.
That's right, we did.
We just sold, yeah. You're welcome, all you drum shops. And our friends.
And if you want to buy them from me, they're called Craftsman Bright Modern hi-hats.
All right.
Because all the series names, they kind of fell under one umbrella. Let me segue into that and sell some more of my singles. How's that?
I want to mention the website address too.
Yep.
I just did a little screenshot of it, but it's Cymbal Craftsman cymbals.com.
Yeah, and I tried to make it longer, but
by Paul Francis. No, Cymbal Craftsman cymbals.com. And this will all be in the show notes, but please check that out. The website looks fantastic, by the way. But yeah, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to.
Had a lot of help with that too. And I want to give a shout out to another former colleague. I only work with former colleagues. Chris Frezza, who worked in the marketing department for many, many years. And now he works for National Geographic. And it was a tight time frame that I put Chris under to get my website updated. And he did a phenomenal job. Really, really great.
Looks beautiful
stuff. And he's just great people. So, and he does freelance work, of course, because Frezza Designs, if you ever need somebody to help you with some stuff, he's really, really great. But so all of the cymbal names series names have changed. So what was known as just the Cymbal Craftsman line is now the Craftsman Dark Vintage, which is more the jazzier stuff. And then I had a Stellar, a Dark, and a Dual Finish, and those fall under the Craftsman Dark Modern. The brighter stuff, the more stuff that's more like, an A Zildjian would be a Craftsman Bright Modern. And I'm going to be working on, fingers crossed, Craftsman Bright Vintage, which is going to really kind of be pinpointed into the late 40s, early 1950s style cymbals, which are a little bit warmer, that kind of brighter but warmer sound. But all of this is on the website. So if I don't have those Craftsman Bright Vintage by the end of the year, please feel free to give me a hard time. That involves me buying a piece of equipment. So
yeah. That's exciting news too. Sorry, if you would repeat the one that's coming soon, which is the
Craftsman Bright Vintage.
Craftsman Bright.
I know, and it says coming soon. So, yeah.
And when and not to put any pressure on you, but how soon do you think that will be? Is that are you working on it as we speak?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm working on the Chicago Drum Show cymbals right now.
Yeah. Okay.
And I never went to the Chicago Drum Show until 2023, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's just a really, really great show, and people come out to really find what they've been looking for, sound-wise, in drums and cymbals and stuff like that. And it's a great, great community.
I've been only one time in 2019, and I'm dying to go back, and my granddaughter
has to stop dancing.
She has to stop dancing. Her dance recital
You get to break her leg.
every year that same weekend. So I managed to go that one year because her recital was on late Sunday afternoon. So I went and I flew home Sunday morning, got there like literally, half hour before Fiona's recital. But this year it's on the Saturday, but I'll get there eventually. Yeah, I'm gonna just tell her to stop dancing. You don't want to do this anymore.
I lived through all of that. I know all about the dance recitals and stuff like that. So,
when Rob Cook was still running it, I begged him to change the weekend, and he just laughed at me. He laughed in my face.
I'm surprised he didn't change it for you.
Well, it's sandwiched, as you know, right in between Mother's Day weekend and Memorial weekend.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like either weekend doesn't work. So it is the perfect weekend for that in terms of no other conflicts other than my granddaughter's recital.
I'll talk to Johnny Drugan, who's running the show now, and I'll insist that he works around your schedule moving forward.
Thanks, pal.
You got it.
Thank you.
I'll pull some strings for you.
All right.
Oh, Jean Nadeau.
Yeah, and I really quickly want to mention, for whatever reason, I'm not seeing if you're typing messages for whatever reason they're not coming through.
There's
and
nobody here. No one's watching.
Why that is?
Just us.
No, there's lots of people watching. But for some reason, I'm kind of afraid to refresh this, but I think I'm going to give a quick refresh to the Facebook feed and see if that wakes things up a bit. Okay, no, there we go. Now I see some. I wanted to
Greg Stein, how are you, Greg?
All right, I thought there might be some comments. There's another
Sean, I know Sean.
Yeah, and another old friend of ours, Jerry Donegan.
Jerry Donegan.
From Zildjian, who is the vice president of sales for, I think, of the 400 years that Zildjian's been in business, Jerry was there for about 250 of them.
I think at least.
I think so.
Yep.
And our friend, Greg Stein. Great to see so many friends watching. And
John Cohen.
John Cohen. Great to see you, John. John Frontinelli. Let me just see if there's any questions here for Paul. Adam Nussbaum.
Nussbaum.
Paul, we've been yapping away, and look at all these
what an honor.
Great people watching. Wow. Folks, I'm going to take a quick look and see if there's any questions for Paul, and then we'll keep going here because we got lots to talk about. And a big shout out to Adam Nussbaum and all our other friends watching.
Clark Bennett, there he is.
And here's Doug McKenzie, who always has great questions. I'm curious what Paul thinks of clap stacks. Are they a trend that's here to stay? Personally, I haven't warmed up to them. I'm glad he didn't ask me that because Doug, I tell you what I think.
I think any product that fills a need of a drummer is appropriate.
Great answer.
Is it going to be around for 40 years, time will tell.
Yeah.
I bought a clap stack. I didn't make myself a clap stack. I bought a clap stack because I just needed something for a song with the cover band that I play in. So I play in a cover band and a rockabilly band, and I bought it and it works perfect. So if you need it for that kind of clap stacky hand clap sound, go for it. Again, working with Armin for so many years, you got to follow the trends.
Yeah.
And sometimes cymbals are designed and they come out and they stay, relevant for a long, long time. And sometimes they don't. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yep.
Well, Paul, you just sold probably several thousand clap stacks.
You told me I get a commission on whatever I'm selling
Yes.
for all of these other companies, right?
All right.
Oh, Jeff Hamilton. So real quick. Hi, Jeff. So everybody asks me about my ride cymbal playing. And every time I demonstrate a cymbal, they're like, wow, your ride cymbal technique is great. So I first worked with Jeff back in 1996. He had come out,
I remember.
and we
30 years ago.
were trying to
Love you, Jeff.
recreate the cymbal that he had that had cracked.
Yeah.
And came into the factory, and I had about 622 set up in the orchestral room, and Jeff asked me to play them. I was playing this kind of sweeping thing, and he's like, no. We all know how Jeff is. He's really calm and subdued and reserved. And he says, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just playing the cymbal. He goes, no. You playing an up-tempo swing gig, man. You're going to run out of steam. And before the second chorus, and he showed me how to play a ride cymbal properly. So whenever you see me playing a ride cymbal, it's because of Jeff Hamilton. So
Wow.
Thank you.
A master, just an absolute master.
Yeah.
And a very, very funny man, too.
Very, very funny man.
But what an incredible musician. And Nick Bolajak is asking any flat rides.
Yep. So in the Craftsman Dark Vintage, there's 18s, 20s, 22s, but I'll make odd sizes too. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
But also I have an 18 that's more in the Craftsman bright modern. That's a nod to the Now He Sings, Now He Sobs flat ride. Now, you probably remember this. This goes way back. Chick Corea came in for a visit.
I remember.
And he actually sent us a fax on remember the hot fax machines?
Yes.
The paper would always roll up.
Absolutely.
And he brought that flat ride in, and he wanted some stuff that were inspired by that flat ride, but from the bronze that we made at the factory. So he got A's and K Custom Darks and K's and A Customs, and it was really fantastic. And I didn't realize how great a drummer he was until he sat down.
Yeah.
So not only did that famous flat ride come in that everybody knows Roy Haynes played, but we got to witness Chick Corea play that in addition to some new stuff. So I'm making an 18 that's kind of a nod to that. I have to use my memory because I don't have that flat and I don't have my notes from my office, but I remember it
I'm sure
distinctly.
You do. Yeah.
So
if we can tell a quick funny story, I thought of this when you were talking earlier about an Elvin K that was a little too heavy.
Yeah.
It reminded me of the story it was right after the Constantinople's came out. I want to say the year was 1999, that the Rolling Stones were in Boston for 2 shows at the Garden. And Charlie's tech, the late, great Chooch McGee, Charlie didn't come to the factory, but his tech, who's no longer with us, Chooch McGee, came in and picked out a couple of, or at least one, but maybe a couple of 20-inch Constantinople rides, which were fairly new at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And John King, our dear friend, our former Zildjian colleague, who was
cymbal tester who became the product specialist.
That's right. He worked with Leon as a cymbal tester.
Extensive vocabulary.
Yes, very. And he worked with Chooch to help pick out 1 or 2 cymbals. In any case, so Chooch takes them to the gig for Charlie to try out. I happened to go the first show. I brought my son with me, who at the time was 11, going on 12, and he got to meet Charlie. And so then I go to the next night, and I bring John King as my guest. And first thing Charlie says is, "Where's your son? Where's John Jr.?" And I said, "Oh, he has school tomorrow. He couldn't come tonight, but he had a great time last night," or whatever. And I introduced him to John King, and he says, "As you know, are you the tester?" and to which John said, "I'm one of the mad scientists, Charlie, that makes these cymbals." "Right, then you're the tester. You can have this back. It's too heavy."
Let me tell you why I don't like this.
And it's an old joke that Paul and I have been laughing about for almost 30 years, but it's
So you're the tester.
so you're the tester.
And it wasn't a diss or anything. It was just, it's like, okay, right. So I talk to you. Let me tell you why I don't like this. Those weren't always fun conversations.
No. And John was kind of like, he said, you can have it back. And Charlie, bless his heart, God rest his soul.
He didn't keep anything that he didn't speak to.
Exactly. He would often, if I sent him something, when I saw him later, he'd give it back, or or I'd bring something when he came to the factory that day.
The day he only wanted to spend an hour and he spent 8.
That's right. Yeah. We were pushing him out the door at 5. Charlie, we got work to do.
But he was looking for, if I remember correctly, you correct me if I'm wrong, he said even in the 1960s, he didn't play cymbals that were made in the 1960s. He looked for cymbals that were made in the 1940s.
That's right.
So he always wanted to play old gear.
That's right.
So no matter how good a brand new cymbal sounded, he just wasn't going to really play it.
Broken in, he'd say, like an old pair of shoes.
Vince Wilburn did sneak in a Crash of Doom.
Yeah.
Though.
And we snuck in the CIA, the vintage CIA crash that when he cracked his old 602, we'd sent him one in the early 2000s when they first came out, and he used it in a different band. And then when that 602 finally cracked and they went back out on tour, he said, "I'll try one of these," so, yeah. But anyway, that was just, it made me think of that funny story. And
God bless John.
Yeah, God bless John. Yeah.
I hope he's doing okay.
Me too. All right. Well, let's keep moving along here, Paul. We've like you said, we've got 4 hours to kill. So we got many more things to talk about. You mentioned, let's talk about some of the dealers. I know you sort of in passing mentioned, but I know they're listed on the website, but maybe you can give a shout out to your...
Oh, geez.
Should we look at the website so we don't forget?
So most of the dealers are in the United States.
Yep.
There's 2 in Canada. There's Timpano Percussion and Dave's Drum Shop.
Yep.
But, there's dealers across the United States from Massachusetts all the way to California. And it's really, really great. I would say my 2 biggest dealers are Memphis Drum Shop and Drum Center of Portsmouth. Because if ever anybody knows about those shops, those are really big retail locations, and they have pretty much anything that you want to order. In addition to all the other dealers, Steve Maxwell's store in the Chicago area, and he's more now by appointment at that store. And he did own Forks, but Daniel Doucette now bought it from Steve, so he owns it now. So they're a dealer. Columbus Percussion. We have Jim Rupp. We know Jim for
forever. Yeah.
Many, many years. And I'm gonna give a little sneak preview of the Chicago Drum Show cymbals at Columbus Percussion on the Wednesday before the Chicago Drum Show.
All right. Fantastic.
So I contacted Jim and said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing an in-store event?" And it would be a kind of a preview of what I'm bringing to Chicago, because I used to drive straight through to the Chicago Drum Show, but we're getting up in age.
Yeah,
and
a smart thing to do.
So we're gonna stop in Columbus and spend some time. So that's the Wednesday before, and things aren't finalized yet. So you'll see more information on the website and also on Columbus Percussion's website. And which reminds me of a funny story about Armin Zildjian calling me, but we'll get to that in a minute. So
will you be selling cymbals at Jim's place?
Yeah.
You will? Okay.
Yep. So this will be a sneak preview of what I'm making. Great. And the great thing is when I make cymbals for a show like Chicago or PASIC, I do multiples of stuff. So I don't just bring one 22-inch ride. I'll do, 2, 3, 4 different finishes, different weights. So if you can't make the Chicago Drum Show, this will be a great time to see them. And then after the Chicago Drum Show at Drugan's Drum Shop, there's going to be a, like an invite-only type of event if you didn't make the Chicago Drum Show. So I just wanted to shout out to that. So I mentioned Dave's.
Yeah.
The Drum Shop of Portland, Maine.
Yeah.
Chris Dielerman. Of course, Wood and Weather Drum Shop. If you're in the Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island area, or just New England, it's a really great drum shop. You have to get out there. Supersonic Music in Kansas.
Okay.
That's Derek Sharp. He owns that. He has a couple stores. He's fantastic. He just got a delivery of cymbals. Cymbal Swap. I don't know if people are familiar with Cymbal Swap. This is where you can rent cymbals. If you're not really ready to commit to a sound, you can rent to try it.
Yeah.
And then, you can also buy it too. So that's Justin Nettie. Forks Drum Closet I mentioned. Badges Drum Shop. So that's Charlie, and he's in Mason, Ohio. That's a really cool drum shop as well. Steeble Drum in Willowick, Ohio.
Yeah.
And John has a fantastic shop. I've done a few in-store events with him. Denver Percussion, Josh Byers. Okay. If you guys know Josh.
I don't know that shop. Okay.
Yep. They're great. Junk Rock Drums, Hawthorne Drum Shop, Chris Hawthorne. He's got a nice spot out in western Pennsylvania. So like in the Pittsburgh area.
Yep.
So if people know who Jerry Porter is, Hazelwood Drums and Cymbals. Yeah. And he's just funny. He's got the, I don't know where he finds these old cymbals that he posts, but it's fantastic. And sometimes there's cymbals I made that went to an artist. And I'm like, I remember that one.
Yeah. I've seen some stuff on his website and gone, hey.
Yeah. Yeah. Mum's the word, right? Right, Jerry?
And is Jerry the one that I see playing?
No, he doesn't. Okay. He's not the one doing the demonstrations.
Okay. Got a great.
But he also, he picks up some stuff that's kind of on the periphery of what you would normally carry.
Yeah.
And he's asked me to make some stuff for him too. Pro Drum Shop, Stan and Jerry. I remember sitting down to call them, and I said, "Hey, this is Paul Francis. You might remember me from Zildjian." And he's like, "Yeah, man, of course, yeah." I'm like, "You remember me?" I said, "The last time I was out there was a Mission from Gad tour." I'm like, "Of course, yeah. We've been watching your whole thing. So we'll send us a list, right? And we'll place an order." And then he hung up the phone. I'm like, "All right, well, that was fantastic. Is that all we have to do?"
That's Stan all the way, or Jerry, either one.
Yeah. So they're just. No nonsense. Yeah. Send us a list. We'll place an order. Okay, have a great day. And I just love it. Good Hands Drum Shop, which used to be a Steve Maxwell store, but Jess Birch, who's the manager for the longest time, now has Good Hands Drum Shop.
Yeah.
And that's it's a great spot to go in Manhattan. Rick's Drum Shop, I mentioned Timpano. Drum Outfitters, yep, they've received some cymbals there. Seawood, Nebraska.
Yeah.
Tommy's Drum Shop in Texas.
Yeah.
And there's a few more. The website isn't totally updated. It's tough when I'm kind of a one-man show.
Paul, that's an incredible dealer base you've set up there in no time, really. I mean, that's very impressive. Well done, my friend.
Well, a lot of them, I have to thank them because a lot of them reached out to me. And, again, knowing my work for decades at our former employer, and they like what I'm doing. They want kind of a boutique-y vibe. And again, everything's made to order, and it's customizable. So some people will say, can I get this? Somebody contacted me and said, can you make me, a thin cymbal like Elvin played? And, again, that's another K. Constantinople story where we went out and we saw Elvin play at the Regatta Bar, and I say it's the last Istanbul K that he probably used before he passed, and it was high shaped and it was very thin and it was shiny, and that was because Keiko cleaned it with Brasso
every day.
Okay, so just want to let you know, I have metallurgy guy that's a metallurgist, and he's a friend. He says don't use Brasso on the cymbals. Okay, don't polish your cymbals with Brasso.
Yeah, highly abrasive.
It's not good for the bronze. But I got contacted by a customer. He said, "Can you make me an Elvin style cymbal?" And I said, "Yeah, I remember Elvin cymbals." So I made one, and then some more orders came in. Round Sound has two, and they're just fantastic. So I kind of, I'll deviate from here's the middle of the road weight cymbals. I can make super thin cymbals if you want them, and I can make heavy cymbals if you want them. So
Can I ask you, with the greatest respect for all the other independent cymbal makers, because I know you have great respect for them. You talk about them all the time. You guys are like, I think it's great, the camaraderie amongst all you guys. Excuse me.
yeah, we talk to each other on a regular basis, actually.
Yeah, and I don't want this to come out the wrong way toward any of those other great cymbal makers, but do these dealers carry other independents, or are you the only one in some of the cases?
Some of them carry some of the other independents.
They do. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And I was just curious to see, like, if they, because I certainly understand how difficult the business is now for drum shops and how many things they can really carry, they can afford to carry, and how many SKUs. There's so many great cymbal and drum companies now that, how does a drum shop carry
Right.
some of everybody? So I was just curious. So, yeah. Well, that's
The short answer is yes.
yeah, that's good. That's good.
Not
to know.
not all of them, but several of them do. And there's a lot. And with regard to this trend of independent cymbal makers, this was recognized years ago that this was kind of going in this direction where, I want something tailored to me. And that's a great thing about what I'm doing now, that, if you say, "Hey, are you familiar with the Nefertiti cymbal that Tony played on that recording?" I'm like, "Yeah, because I had it in my office for 10 years because it belonged to Wallace Roney, the late great trumpet player that had played with Tony, had played with Miles, and Tony gave it to him. So I actually had it in my hands. So I'm very familiar with that. Now, having said that, if you see a Nefertiti style by Cymbal Craftsman, it's a nod to what that cymbal is. It's not a direct copy. It's nearly impossible to copy another cymbal.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. That's an important distinction to make, like you say too, that it's a nod to it. It's it's well in the zone, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. If you have a similar cup, curvature, hammering style, and the weight, you get 90% there.
Yeah.
But can you hit it up, grand slam out of the ballpark? No, because that piece of metal is a snapshot in time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Exactly. And we talk about this often, you and I, and we have Adam Nussbaum watching right now, and
I have his pre-aged dry light right on the shelf out here. The one that was made in 1989 before it had a name.
yes. Boy, those were great cymbals. But, when you have people like Adam or Tony, or we mentioned Peter Erskine, their mojo, their playing is such a big factor in all that too. Elvin, when I remember going up and playing Elvin cymbals and thinking they just didn't sound good, and then you'd hear him play them and they were like, mystical, magical, unbelievable,
So I'd like to share two stories, and I've shared these before, but I want to share them again. So with regard to Elvin, Elvin came in, and this was probably 1998. This is Was it 97? Okay,
yeah, I know what you're talking. Yeah,
and I was alone with him in the orchestral room, showing him 20-inch K Constantinople light ride cymbals, and I remember calling Schofield, saying to me, "Listen, Elvin plays high-shaped cymbals and they're thin, so make him some K-Cons." And he got to see like the very first light rides.
Yeah.
And he came into the room, and I was pretty young in 1997. So, and I had no business being in a room alone with Elvin Jones, but he was such a sweetheart. So he came in, he saw the cymbals, he grabbed a stick, and he was playing all the cymbals, and then he put the stick down, and he left the room, and he didn't say anything. Now, I have no witnesses, so you have to believe me. And he was gone for about 10 minutes. And I'm like, he went to find Colin or you or somebody, like, okay, who's the child that I'm in this room with? And can you go get me somebody that has a less amount of teeth in their mouth and is older? And so then Elvin comes back, and I'm like, so Elvin, is everything okay? Is everything all right? And he's like looking at me like puzzled. He's like, what? And he said, you played the cymbals and you laughed and you didn't say anything. He goes, oh no. I knew these cymbals were good before I got here. And this is the key. If I can't make these sound good, there's something wrong with me.
Wow.
So most of these drummers, they need to find something that has really good stick definition, with everything else being in support of the stick, because they're the timekeeper of the band.
Yeah.
And it was just funny. And he says, yeah, I like this one and that one. And, when you come to the gig tonight, I want you to see the Istanbul K that I'm playing, and I'm not going to take it down because the guys in the band are used to it. And, he literally took me over and took the cymbal off the stand and showed me in between sets.
Yeah.
So, but if I can't make this sound good, there's something wrong with me, which is just, as Buddy Rich said, syncopation's up to you. Right?
Yes.
Sorry. That's not even my story.
No, that's such a great story.
So,
but man, that's so profound. No, that's so Elvin. He was just like this, oh man, like a prophet, like just to say that. I was going to say he probably had wandered into the drummer's lounge because I bought some cold Beck's beer.
oh yeah, he had to have Bex. He wanted to smoke too.
Yeah.
We let him smoke in the factory. He was the only one.
He was the only one.
So you probably also remember Louis came into the factory. And I have a picture somewhere of Leon and I showing him some K Constantinople's. And he said, oh, you guys are coming out to the gig tonight. And I said, yes. And he goes, that's great. So, we, as usual, and this might have been because of Lenny DiMuzio, we were running late. Yeah. And we got to Scholars late. And Louis was playing with a quintet that night. So we got there, we got to our table, and the band was playing, and he was crushing it. This was unbelievable. Like I hadn't really seen Louis play with a band,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't know what that ride cymbal is that he's playing, but that is the prettiest, like late 40s, early 50s I've ever heard. Armin must have picked this out for him. Or maybe Louis came in and Avidus helped him or whatever. So then the first set gets over and Louis comes up to the table. He's like, hey guys, how you doing? And we're all there and holding court. And I looked at him and I said, man, that ride cymbal. And he kind of had a twinkle in his eye and he goes, right? He goes, you want to see it? And I go, yeah. And I'm like, I'm going to go see like this funky old cymbal that was made a gajillion years ago. And we get up to the stand, and Louis smiling, and I get up there, and he was playing a 21-inch rock ride.
I knew you were going to say that.
And I went, what? He goes, right? Doesn't it sound great? I go, you're crashing it. How are you making this manhole cover sound great? And then again, it goes back to, it's Louis.
Yeah, what a touch. I know. I know. And Buddy
Thanks for the bourbon.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. Bottoms up. Buddy used a rock ride at different times too.
Impulse ride one time too.
Yeah, I mean, it's just those guys were, and again, Elvin's cymbals were so thin, and he used those really light sticks, but his touch was just.
And that day, Elvin said to me, he goes, I'm going to show you this cymbal when you come to the gig, but it's not the one that I recorded this with or that with. Those are broken. I broke all of them. This was just another good one I had in my apartment. So It wasn't like, here's the really, really cool stash, and I played this one on my favorite thing, so Coltrane. It was like, nah, those cymbals are gone. Yeah. They're in pieces.
Yeah. I know.
So
we talked about, I want to make sure we get everything in here we want to talk about today. I'd made a note about and I know this is covered on the website, but in the different series and the different finishes. And maybe we could just take a second and talk about that, like what a different, in terms of how the sound is affected, like what a different finish does to a cymbal.
So, there's only 3 finishes really, what I have. So there's traditional finish, and that's what the cymbal looks like after it's been lathed.
Yeah.
I do a patina finish, and that's very similar to what was done on early Caropes, because I'm the one that developed that process way back when. So it's similar to that. It's more of a golden brown color, which is how they started off. And then there's a brilliant finish, which is shiny, but it's not, I don't polish the cymbals. I actually have a cutting tool that makes the cymbals shiny. And it's more for a visual appearance than it being sonic, where it actually changes the surface tension of the metal. And you can order any finish you want, and you can order rivets, and there's no extra charge for that.
Yeah. And do you have, Paul, I know, you've talked about this where, you want to make sure your customers are happy. Mm-hmm. There's probably been a situation where maybe someone has bought a cymbal and wasn't 100% happy, and you've had to.
Mm-hmm. One time.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Maybe you
and
can
I
talk
refunded
about
the
that
money. And
really?
I said, yep. And I said, I don't think what I'm making is, what you're after. And I encouraged them to look at some of the other independents.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's huge. I thought maybe, it was a question of he wanted, a little more stick to it, or maybe a little lighter.
Well, there was some back and forth, and it just got to the point where it was, I felt I was ticking all the boxes, and it just wasn't there yet. And you can only do so many rounds of tweaking to a new cymbal before you're going to, you'll knock the temper out of the metal if you lathe it too much and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah. It's, and sometimes, I wasn't going to get into like a lot of old stories, but it's funny how just myself after leaving Zildjian and getting back into playing again. And you and I used to laugh about drummers, friends of ours, artists that would come in and go through every cymbal in the place and not really be happy or sure. It's just one of those things. And how easy it is to become one of those people. I realize personally how, like all of a sudden when you have all these different options out there, mm-hmm. it can definitely be overwhelming. And so I don't know where it's going with that.
It's not a problem, because I'm used to it.
Yeah.
And, as somebody that makes a musical instrument, it's my job to help you find what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's a good way.
And again, if somebody wants to, well, for example, Hawthorne Drum Shop contacted me and had a customer that wanted a 23-inch case sweet ride style cymbal, but thinner, and then a 21-inch paper thin Craftsman Dark Vintage type of cymbal, thin. And I'm like, okay, so who's your customer? Give me his phone number. And we had a conversation.
Yeah.
So there always has to be a conversation, because I don't want to make something and you're disappointed with it. So and there's been people saying, well, if this thing gets bigger and grows, you won't be able to do that. And I really hope that doesn't happen. Because I like to talk to drummers, and I want to make sure you're getting what you're paying for. It's a lot of money. Cymbals cost a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't see that ever happening with you, Paul. I really don't. I think you'll find a way to always make sure, no matter how big you get, that it's never going to get to the point where you can't, kind of be that accessible, to make sure somebody's happy. And I did find a couple of questions as we start to wind things down. I wanted to. Here's someone from Sweden. I hope I pronounce your name correctly. I'm sorry if I don't. I'm going to say Garbus Serafian?
Armenian.
Armenian, yeah. Huh. Please share some thoughts on the future of the cymbal making industry. If you have any thoughts on that?
I think you're kind of living in the future of it, where there's more smaller, discrete makers, customization. Mm-hmm. I think drummers really, really like that they can talk to a craftsman and have something made to their specifications. So that's a trend that we're in the middle of. And I don't think that's going to stop. We witnessed this a long time ago with drum makers, where you first saw custom snare drums and then custom drum check sets and stuff like that. So now you're seeing a proliferation of it with cymbal makers. And I think that's going to continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great answer. Perfect. Yeah. And here's a question from Glenn Jenkins. Paul, at your previous employer, when you made cymbals for artists, what happened to the ones that didn't meet the grade? Did they go into general inventory? I ask because I've had a few over the years that were really special, not just very good general stock.
So if I made prototypes, I would send a bunch to artists, or the artist would visit and take them with them. And then when they would visit again, or sometimes they would send some back and say, these really didn't hit the mark. And it didn't mean that the cymbals were bad.
Yeah.
So they would kind of go on what was called an artist shelf, a non-inventory shelf. So if other artists came in and were looking for something, they could find them on that shelf.
Yeah.
But oddly enough, I used to feel sad that, oh, you didn't like these ones. And it's not that they didn't like them, it's just they didn't speak to them. And I used to leave the cymbals in the drummer's lounge, leaning up against the wall or one of the drum risers. And I'm telling you, the next day some artist would come in and go, oh, what are those? I'm like, oh, those were cymbals at so-and-so. They didn't like them. They didn't speak to them. And this drummer that had just arrived would go through and go, oh my God, I've been looking for this sound for years, and they would take it. So they always found a home.
Yeah.
And if that didn't happen at the factory, well, Jerry Porter of Hazelshire ended up with them.
And he's selling them for top dollar.
He's selling them for top dollar. Oh. Bob Terry.
Yeah.
How are you?
I want to read this comment from our good friend Bob Terry, an old buddy of Paul's and mine. Several years ago, Paul picked out a whole set of cymbals for me as a surprise and sent them to me. Best sounding cymbals ever. Thank you, Paul.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad that you're happy with them, and I'm glad that you're watching two South Shore guys.
Yeah.
Talk about cymbals.
Two guys.
Two guys.
Two
chimps on a dad report. That's a Wayne's World reference if people
right.
don't know what I'm talking about. I only talk in movie references.
Well, Paul, this has been great, and I want to just check one more time to see if there are any other questions, and I want to thank everybody who's tuned in today. There's been some really great comments. Let me just hit this one more time. Let's see. Don Heisler, look at that. Look at
Rip Belinsky. I've made some cymbals for him. Yep.
Yep. Great. Tim Coletti. Tim, you got a shout out?
Yep.
You'll have to watch this in the replay.
You got a shout out, Tim. I told him that you made the logo.
All right. And Jeff Hamilton, it's great to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate it. And Adam Nussbaum and John Ferraro, all you guys, really appreciate it. Oh, there's Jason. Let's see what the question from Jason.
He's got a heavy hitters question. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you talk about how, generally speaking, the bell heights and bow heights affect the sound, and if there are any specific model cymbals that have been good for you to modify into classic big band jazz cymbals? We got to answer that question before we...
Okay, there's a lot of questions there. So just the bell in general gives you the volume of the cymbal. So a smaller bell is going to give you less sustain than a big bell. A taller bell is going to have more highs. So, if you have, what do I want to call it? Like the K. Constantinople high bell, was only probably about 4 inches or even less in diameter. It was tall. So you get more highs out of a bell like that.
Okay.
If you have a big bell that's tall, you get all kinds of frequency ranges in there, but you have a lot of sustain. So the sustain comes from the bell. Curvature, the higher the curvature, the brighter the cymbal's going to be. And that's, relative to weight and stuff like that. The dry complex cymbals had a very, very high curvature, so you could have a really great stick definition, but they were super light. So technically they were lower in pitch. But when you play a lower pitch cymbal, the highs speak first. So that's why there's always a confusion that a thin crash is brighter than a medium thin crash, which is not the case. So if you have a 16-inch thin, medium thin, and medium, the medium's the highest pitched cymbal. But you hear the highs first in the thin crash. So, this one's higher than that one. And the best way to determine that is just tap on the cymbals. Don't crash them, because once you crash them, you activate all the overtones and undertones, and it gets confusing.
That's Great information. great
And what
advice.
was the other part of that question with big band? Okay.
Let's see. How these affect the sound, if there are any specific model cymbals that have been good for you to modify into a classic big band jazz cymbal.
I can't say that any of them, nobody asked me to do that. A lot of people have some A's from the 70s, which were very apropos at the time, if you think about it. The classic Aerosmith in Boston, the Who. While I was hammering, I always listen to music. I was listening to Who's Next because Keith Moon is my guy, and those are A's.
Yeah.
But now the cymbal trends are they're thinner. They don't need to be as heavy, and a lot of people send them in. So they have a wider dynamic range. Can you keep the stick, but can you give me more breath in the cymbal, where it speaks easier and it's not as gongy or clangy. You can use any cymbal for a big band situation as long as the stick definition is there. So I want to reiterate that. As drummers, our role is to provide the time. Here's the time in the playing situation. And if your fellow musicians can't hear the time, the instrument isn't working. Okay?
Yeah.
So make sure that it's working appropriately for the playing situation that you're in. So, a thinner cymbal can be used in a trio situation because there's not a lot of volume there. But if you need to kick a big size band, you need something that has some weight behind it. And so I don't know why this just popped into my head, but with regard to the cymbal setup for Neil Peart, way back when, he used to say he played 16-inch medium thin crashes, but he didn't. He played 16-inch rock crashes. And if you ever went to a Rush concert and you heard him, he had two of them. Wherever he was in the middle of his long drum fill, he always made sure he had one of those there. And all you heard was the attack. You heard the crash, psh, and it sounded like the most prettiest thin crash, medium thin crash ever, but it was heavy. And if you ever played a 16-inch rock crash by itself, it's pretty clangy.
Yeah.
But he picked the appropriate cymbal for the situation he was in. So I don't know if that answers the question.
No, I think that's a great answer. And I want to just give a shout out to our friend Billy Drummond.
Oh, hey, Billy. How are you?
Legendary Billy Drummond, who's watching. And
he's got some of the best old Ks I've ever played.
Yeah.
And Billy coined the term, drum sheriff or drum police. We were joking one time in the lounge about how there's a lot of drum sheriffs out there in the forums.
Oh yeah, he's a besides being a fabulous drummer, a great historian as well.
Yes.
And Jim Royal, our friend Jim Royal's watching. And yeah. All right. Love you too, Adam Nussbaum.
Brett Campbell. Hey, Brett.
Yeah, look at that, Mike Rigello. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. This has been such a treat and such a pleasure to have my buddy Paul Francis here with me today.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much.
And everybody, don't forget to check out Paul's website, which is cymbalcraftsmancymbals.com. It's live now, and I will put that in the show notes, as I said. And there's information on contacting Paul. And you, Paul, should we just your email address?
Yeah. So the old email addresses still work. Those, if you email the Royal Cymbals one, they're getting forwarded to the Cymbal Craftsman one. But the new email addresses are info@cymbalcraftsmancymbals.com and paul@cymbalcraftsmancymbals.com.
Great.
So I have like 12 email addresses now. So I do check them all, and I will get back to you.
He will.
I promise.
If he doesn't, contact me and I'll make sure he does.
Yeah, he'll text me and I'll pick up my phone and put the hammer down and say, oh, okay, I missed that. My daughter does that. And she'll like, did you see this? Meaning, you need to stop what you're doing because this guy contacted twice. So
that's good. She's good. Yeah. She's good. Everybody, thank you so much. A big hand for Paul Francis. Yay. And congratulations on his rebranding and basically same company but new company name.
Yeah.
Cymbal Craftsman by Paul Francis.
And I hope to see you guys at a store or trade show soon.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon. All right, that's my show. If you enjoyed it, give it a like, leave me a comment, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can also download the episodes on all podcast platforms. And please visit my website, livefrommydrumroom.com, for upcoming shows and information on purchasing Live from My Drum Room t-shirts and hoodies. 100% of the proceeds go toward a scholarship I've created with the Percussive Arts Society. The link is also in the show notes. And you can contact me through my website or at livefrommydrumroom@gmail.com. And remember, no drummers are harmed on any show. And drummers, when in doubt, leave it out. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I'll see you again real soon.